This episode of Accelerate is brought to you in part by Discover.org. Looking to close 4 times as many deals in half the time? Discover.org's industry-leading, human-verified sales intelligence gives you all of the data and insights like direct dials, org charts, planned projects, verified emails, and executive moves you need to stop wasting time on research and spend more time talking to the right decision-maker with the right message at the right time. Their team of 250-plus sales researchers do all the work so that you don't have to. 2,500 companies are already using Discover.org to win more deals. So check them out at www.discoverorg.com. That's www.discoverorg.com. It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 570 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. So joining me on the show today, Matt Ostanik. Matt's the founder and CEO of FunnelWise. And on today's show, we're going to talk about your data and funnel metrics and how to use these to provide the right sales effort at the right time with confidence and certainty. So also get into why we need to dig deeper into our data and really surface what are really the true stories that our prospects need to hear to move forward in their decision making. If you'd like to see the summary notes for this episode, go to andypaul.com/570. In case you missed it at the beginning of the show, this episode is brought to you by our great partner, Discover.org. The Discover.org platform is a game changer for sales, marketing, and staffing professionals. The feature-rich sales intelligence platform is supported by over 250 researchers who are continually updating the contact data and providing account-specific insights to help the sales and marketing teams that are using it break ahead of the pack. So see the product live. Go to discoverorg.com/schedule-demo. That's discoverorg.com/schedule-demo. Hey, do you have your copy yet of Amp Up Your Sales? That's my book that's on HubSpot's list of the 20 best sales books of all time. So you want to learn precisely how to amp up your sales by maximizing the value you deliver to your prospects in each and every sales interaction? Then this is a book for you. Check it out now on Amazon.com. It's actually, they have it on sale. So it's normally priced around $13.99. It's now available for Kindle at $7.99 and paperback for $10.99. Make sure you check that out. Finally, before we get to the interview, I want to remind you, as always, I want to hear your questions about the sales challenges you're facing, questions you have that you just haven't been able to get the answer to, need some outside advice about what you could do. Well, what we'll do is each week I'll choose one of the questions submitted, and during my Friday conversation with my friend Bridget Gleason, we'll answer that question. And the winner, the person who submit the question that we choose to answer, actually will win a free half-hour coaching session with me. That's a $250 value. So don't delay. Submit your question today. There's 2 ways you can do it. First, you can email me. You can send the question to me at andy@andypaul.com. Or better yet, just go to my website, andypaul.com. On the lower right-hand side of the homepage, there's a red button that says Ask Your Question. Click on that and just speak your question, and I'll receive it as an audio file. And if it's the winning question, we'll play it on the air. All right, so make sure you do that. Submit your questions today at andy@andypaul.com or just go to andypaul.com. All right, let's get on with the conversation. Let's jump into it. Matt Ostanik, welcome to Accelerate.
Hi, Andy. It's great to be here with you today.
Great to have you. So where are you joining us from today?
I am in lovely Des Moines, Iowa today.
Des Moines, Iowa. And it is lovely there today?
It's actually a little hot and sticky, but we've had some rain. Can't complain. Our great state fair just ended, which is always a terrific event for the entire state. So
it is.
Big times.
So one of my goals in life is to do Ragbray. And for those who are listening and don't understand what that is, that's the Register's annual Great Bicycle Ride across Iowa. And as a bicyclist, it's on my list to be able to do at some point. So I guess it's like a lottery or something, right, to get in?
It is. It's a really cool event. You know, Ragbray, they change the route every year where it goes across the state. And it actually went in front of my house, like 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago.
Oh, really?
In the small town outside of Des Moines where my wife and I actually live. And it was really cool because I've not been on Ragbray myself, but I always pictured a lot of Iowans riding bicycles, which it is. But there was actually a woman outside of our house that happened to have a sign that said, "Yell out where you're from." And as people were riding by, they were yelling out where they were from. And literally, it was people from all around the country and the world. It draws so many different people from all over the place to participate in it. It's a really cool event.
Yeah, well, it's a 7-day ride, right? I think across.
Yes.
And I don't know how many tens of thousands of people do it. It's like,
I'm not even sure. I've seen them right by my house, and I'm not even sure. But it was quite a few. Yes, it's packed.
Yeah, it's packed, and you stop at these small towns along the way, and it becomes a huge event for each of the towns that are hosting it, sort of like the Tour de France to some degree, right? And
slightly less hills and a little more good food along the way. But yes,
well, yeah. I mean, the one thing I always heard about is, yeah, they bring out the baked goods and the pies and so on. Is that you may be riding a lot, but you're going to gain some weight if you're indulging properly. So, all right, that's on my list. Come back to Iowa, where my family's from, and do that ride at some point. So, all right. So we digressed a little bit, but I usually have a standard question I ask all my guests at the start of the show, and now that we're a few minutes into it, I'll ask it anyway. And the question is, in your mind, what's the single biggest challenge that faces sales reps today?
That's a great question. There are a lot of challenges, as you very well know, in the space as a whole. So, single biggest challenge, I think that what I see happening is there's been clearly changes in buying behavior, which a lot of people have talked about more eloquently than I ever can, about how customers make decisions about what to buy and how that's impacted our sales work, including the fact that so many people are further along in the decision-making process before they actually ever speak to a salesperson, right? Mm-hmm. But I think combining those changes with buyer behavior, along with just all the new technology in the space, sales professionals today have so many different things to master, whether it's their use of social media to whatever selling tools their employers are deploying, so many different things that impact it as well, that I guess I'm kind of giving you two answers, but the combination of changes in buying behavior plus changes in how sales does their job, you have to be able to roll with it. You have to be able to be very adaptable and move very quickly with all the changes around you to be successful in sales, from what I've seen.
All right. So a question for you is, at what point do you think that we can stop saying, because this is something we all indulge in, we can stop saying is that buying is so much different now today, and we give the reasons that are relevant, but the fact is they've really sort of been relevant for about 20 years now. So it's like, yeah, it's not different. This is the new normal, right? I mean, it's gonna have to change from here at some point. So maybe one of the questions is, yeah, I mean, there's been increased capabilities online, given the growth of the internet, and we'd certainly say for the last 10 years, every company's had a website. We can say the last 15 probably very comfortably. So where do you sort of see buying changing going forward?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I agree with you. Like there's also some fundamentals that don't change, right? Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of things that continue to be in motion around it. I mean, I even think I'm kind of mid-career. My sales career isn't that long, but I've seen a fair amount of changes even in my time, and just not even the technology, but thinking about how, particularly the B2B space, how companies make decisions around what to buy. And you think about more of the committee-driven process, the consensus process. You think about the concept of demand units that Serious Decisions introduced this year in terms of how you measure your waterfall or funnel, and just using it as a way to reflect these units of people that are making decisions versus the traditional old school lone buyer, depending on what level you're selling at. I mean, it still feels like there's a lot of evolution in that area, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, but it's interesting. I had a guest on the show, or two guests actually, recently for this, that gentleman named Steve Martin, who's a professor, I believe, at USC in Southern California, well-known sales researcher, expert, writes a lot for Harvard Business Review as well. But Discover.org had sponsored a study that he did about buying behaviors and so on. And I thought it was interesting. One of the key findings of his study was that across 10 different industries, that, yeah, there are these demand units, there are more consensus buying, quote unquote consensus buying, committee-driven buying. But humans being humans, the fact is there's one person in all those groups who dominates, whose opinion counts more than all the others, basically.
Yeah, that's interesting.
which I think is I think it's just fundamental of human behavior.
I'm not sure I agree with that 100%. You're saying that's a research finding, or that's just an observation?
Research finding.
Interesting. I apologize for not being as familiar with that research. I'll have to dig into it some more as well.
It's relatively new. You can find the report at discoverorg.com.
Yeah. I'm thinking what was playing through my head was examples of groups I've sold to with some of our clients in the past year or two and how I've seen those groups behave. What's interesting and challenging, right, is you don't always know the real dynamics. As a seller, you're trying to pick into pieces of information and reading the signals from it, right? But sometimes you don't understand the true dynamics in an organization until after you're already working with them as a client or further down the road, or sometimes never. And of course, it's our job as sellers to try and figure out those dynamics. Exactly. And some of our success hinges on that. But sometimes sometimes you feel like you're a little bit in the dark on some of that until after the fact as well.
Yeah. I mean, you can't always learn everything, right? But I think that it does speak to, I think one of the points, either implicitly or explicitly in the report, was that you really have to, in your discovery, really have to pay attention to this. As part of your questioning has to be around this idea that, who are the dominant personalities?
Yeah, whose opinion matters more. Makes sense.
Yeah, because there's always somebody who cares more than somebody else. I mean, that's sort of the other thing about buying is that, and it's certainly been my experience over decades, is that there's, today as much as 20 years ago, there's always one person who cares more than everybody else because it's their job.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's something they're held accountable for, or they're measured on, or things like that. Oftentimes, impact that for sure.
Yeah, you need to find out who that person is. So, all right. So tell us a little bit about FunnelWise and what you guys do.
Yeah, so FunnelWise is a solution and also a set of services that helps you ultimately get more out of your marketing and sales funnel. So I started the company 3 years ago. I previously had started and grown a SaaS business that had a product in the commercial construction space. Mm-hmm. I ultimately sold that business and worked for the acquirer for a couple of years afterwards as well. I managed a large and growing marketing and sales organization, and I was a power user of Salesforce as our CRM and a variety of other technology tools, but I used to get frustrated because as a business leader and a marketing and sales leader, I could look into Salesforce, for example, and get good information about some of the things my team was doing, like how many people did we call on last week or how many demos did we do last month, but I couldn't get more of the forward-looking insights into where my funnel was headed in the future. Did I have enough stuff happening higher up in my funnel to get me to my revenue goals for next quarter or the quarter after that? And even more importantly, was my team doing the right things at every step in the funnel to get me to those future goals as well? Or where did I need to go make changes or adjustments? And I've always been kind of a data guy. So I used to download data from Salesforce and build big spreadsheet models to try to analyze what was happening in our funnel. Most of us have had those experiences at various points trying to tackle those spreadsheets. And it worked. It kind of worked, but it was also frustrating at points. And I just felt like there was a need for a better way to really understand where I was going and to really help me translate my data more to specific actions that my team could be taking. So when I eventually left the company that had acquired my last business, I decided to jump into this space and try to create a better solution. So we launched FunnelWise, our product, 2 years ago. And what's been interesting, we're a software tool that connects to your marketing automation and CRM data. But what we've really found in this space is, the real driving need is companies that are trying to get more out of their funnels. So they're trying to get more revenue, more growth out of their investments in marketing and sales, both their team and their other infrastructure. And we've built a really interesting process of benchmarking funnel performance metrics from one company to the next that allows us to really see how your funnel compares to others. And from that, we can oftentimes help companies identify specific areas of their funnel where they can make improvements and gain more revenue from it. And I use the term funnel a lot, right? But really a funnel, as you know, it's a complex machine. It's a lot of moving parts and really digging into what's working, what's not, and where can I get more out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I was just laughing because I thought, you're doing a good job of reinforcing the word funnel, FunnelWise, the branding
yes,
reinforcement.
We're using the word funnel. Yes.
Yeah, very, very, very good. So, so what are those funnel performance metrics or revenue funnel metrics, as you use the term on your website? What are those?
Well, there are a lot of detailed things that you can dig into
Sure.
around your funnel, right? But what we look at from a benchmarking standpoint are a few key things. And we start, many funnels today are being partially or sometimes completely fed by leads coming from marketing.
Mm-hmm.
The famous marketing qualified lead, or MQL. Not everybody uses that terminology, but a lot of companies do.
Sure.
And regardless of what you call it, that point in your funnel where marketing is tossing a lead over to sales. So we look at what the conversion rates are from those leads from marketing into sales opportunities in your funnel. I can tell you that the best performing companies typically would have 30% or more of their marketing qualified leads actually converting into sales opportunities. And then we can actually go in and we look at the win rates on those opportunities. And typically in the best performing companies, you see the opportunities that are coming from marketing usually would have a higher win rate than the other stuff that's being sourced differently. And the reason for that is the additional nurturing and qualification that happens on the marketing side. But a lot of times those metrics aren't there, like you see the inverse being true. And so there's things that are happening kind of in that middle funnel handoff that impact that we help organizations with. And then moving further down your funnel, when you actually look more at the sales portion of it, a lot of companies talk about their win rates, right? Like, hey, we win 20% of our deals, 30% of our deals. What's more interesting to me as a data guy is to look at the individual win rates across your entire sales team, whether you have a 10-person team or a 50-person team or a 500-person team. Let's look at all the different performance levels from each team member and then calculate the variance across them. So the difference from one team member to the next. And it's really interesting because the best performing companies, you see those variances tightly clustered. Like they generally get about the same thing out of most of their players. But in other companies, you see those results being all over the board, which doesn't tell you all the answers in and of itself, but it's kind of like a warning sign or a little flag that's waving at you saying, hey, look at me further or dig deeper here. And when we see those types of higher level metrics, then we know to dig deeper into what's happening with their sales processes to really understand why they're getting different results from different people's. So sorry, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but those are some of the key things that we look into.
Well, but I think it raises sort of the central question with a lot of analytics and data and maybe the central challenge is we have all these various dimensions that are variables, right? I mean, so you're talking about benchmarking and so on, but I mean, deal size, the industry of the seller, industry of the buyer, the product, the rep's experience, size of the buyer, the company, the title of the buyer, gender of the sales rep, all these things, could create almost an endless list. So how do you normalize data across all these variables? Because, it's really hard to understand the context without knowing what some of these are. But this is what I see applied. Yeah, this is what our data is telling us across our funnel, across our pipeline. But yeah, we've got, 30 individual situations that are completely different than the other.
Yeah, no, really, really good question. And a couple comments on that. So there's so many different things to look at. It's easy to get confused. And I think that's why many organizations, sometimes they struggle with it, or sometimes they feel like they have a handle on a piece of it, but they're still working to get their arms around the rest of it because there's so many different data points to consider. And what I tell people is this isn't rocket science. It's not like quantum physics. It's any of those individual data points are not overly complex in my opinion, but it's confusing and it's noisy. What do you look at and how do you actually use it and what are the fair comparisons? So two answers I would give to that. So one is in the work that we've done, we've built a benchmarking database from companies that we've had a chance to work with or connect with. And what we have found from that is there are some things that are fair to compare from one funnel to the next and others that are not. And so some of those data points I mentioned, like win rate variance is something you can measure across any sales team or MQL conversion. There's going to be some differences in that depending on what type of company you are. But those are fair comparison points that are shared. There's other things that are much more specific to a type of company or industry that you have to be careful with their use on. One of the other things that I've learned, having been in this space for several years now, is honestly, when I started FunnelWise, I viewed this initially as a technology challenge. Like people just need a better piece of software to help them with their funnel data. And what I've really learned is there's a huge need for additional education in the space. Everybody knows what a funnel is and they think they know how it works. But to kind of answer your question, like what matters? What do I look at? How do I boil this stuff down? How do I actually use it as well? there's people are still rapidly learning around that. About a year ago, not to put in a shameless plug here, but I will. About a year ago, I wrote a book on that topic, and it's called Revenue Funnel Science: How to Optimize Your Marketing and Sales Funnel. And it's a non-product specific, not trying to sell you anything in particular, other than to talk about how important funnel data is and how to use it. So it's a great book. It's available for download on our website right now. It's about 200 pages, so it's a little bit thick, but it really walks you through all the individual steps from what we see companies doing for how you should look at and measure and utilize your funnel data as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll check that out. Because again, the question I posed to me is really the key challenge. Yeah, we can draw broad conclusions off data, but to me that always seems a little dangerous, right? Especially given all the variables. But I mean, some are worthwhile, absolutely.
And then what you do with it, I should have mentioned this in my answer too, but to be more specific, you draw some conclusions and you test them. It's an ongoing testing and iteration process. Whenever you're trying to get more out of your funnel or improve what you're doing, build a hypothesis and test it. Your hypothesis could be our conversion rate isn't as good as we think it could be in this specific area, right? Because we've compared to these benchmarks and we think we could improve something here. Well, that's a hypothesis. Then you dig in and you take a look at, okay, what are my people actually doing? What are my salespeople actually doing? What are the actions that are contributing to this? How does that differ from one person to the next? And you map that out and you try to make a change in your actions or steps or however you're approaching your sales process. And then you test on it. And in my experience, whether that test lasts 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months, you keep reviewing what's happening and then you iterate on that, which means you just make another adjustment based on what you're learning. And it's probably, I think part of the point you're making, Andy, right, is it's hard to draw like this big overall conclusion, but you can certainly build individual hypotheses from it. And then you can go in and test them and learn some more and test something else and keep iterating on it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you talk about is, and not just you, but a lot of people with data-oriented services and systems, is that we want to use our metrics to show who are the top performers and what they're doing, and try to get everybody else to do what they're doing. And I haven't really seen that work for reasons that I think go beyond data, but it always seems to be the holy grail of that's promised by systems.
Well, I think, when you think about it, I'd be curious for your opinion on that actually too, with all of your expertise. But, from my perspective, when I look at a sales team, right, there's really 3 key dimensions that impact their results. So one is like, what are they doing? What are the actual actions they're taking, the steps they're taking? How are they selling? But the 2 other dimensions, which are a little bit harder to measure, but are still equally as impactful. What are the skill sets of those individual sellers, right? Mm-hmm. How developed are they as a sales professional? And then, what is their knowledge on what they're doing? So if they're selling a particular piece of software, or a particular tool, or whatever other market they're in, what's their knowledge on the space and the product or solutions they're offering and the competitors and all of that? And it's really that combination of skill set, knowledge, and actions they're taking that impact it. So by adjusting just the action side, you can have significant results. I have seen some successes with that, but it's not the end all be all. Sometimes if you go in and do the work on the action side, since that can be easier to control, arguably in some ways, it can help you isolate about whether that's the problem or maybe whether you have an issue with skills or with the knowledge of the sellers as well. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how does that fit with kind of your model and how you look at selling as well in terms of the key dimensions?
I mean, it's aligned. I mean, I think that my concern is that I see increasingly, and a little concerned about this, sort of less emphasis on the person aspect of it, right? That we tend to be more about the data and the process, and if we want to achieve 15% growth, we go do 15% more of what we've been doing.
That's not realistic. Yes. There's
right.
Still yes.
But that oftentimes seems to be the strategy. And, you can make your argument about, hey, we can test various things. But I think what we don't do enough of is test the real variable, which is the individual. Mm-hmm. Right. And how do we really improve the productivity of the individual seller? And I think that to me is the puzzle. The biggest part of the puzzle is still left unsolved. Is even the basic thing is, how do we measure productivity? in an actual productivity sense, not just performance against quota. How do we measure productivity? Because that ultimately tells you more about your total capacity as a sales organization than performance against quota.
Yeah, well, I think that actually ties really nicely back into what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Art versus science. So it's still a people business. I love data. Data can tell you very insightful things that can help you grow your business significantly, but it's still a people business ultimately as well. And part of this is even when you're getting conclusions from data or developing hypotheses from data, I mean, you still have to translate that back to your people in a way to actually work with them. And that's part of we've been talking about art and science of sales, but there's also an art and science of sales management as well, right?
Sure.
Particularly the particularly skilled sales managers that are excellent at really getting the most out of their team, developing them, maximizing them, helping them grow and succeed with their personal goals in addition to hitting the business's revenue goals. I mean, a big part of that art is actually translating this stuff into how do you work with that person to help them grow in what they're doing as well.
Yeah, well, that's where I get into the productivity, because to me this is one of the key metrics that no one pays any attention to in an absolute sense. If you look at productivity as economists measure it, as it's a unit of productivity, right? We can make, with this investment, we can make X number of units per unit of time, right? So if you're really going to look at growth and scaling and look at capacity of your organization, you really have to understand what each individual theoretically can produce at a maximum given a certain amount of level of investment. And I think that is really the lever we don't touch enough.
Yeah, I think organizations are getting into that more and more, right? So there's a challenge of how you quantify it and how you measure it. But it's one of the things that we get into working with some of our clients on. And this isn't exactly what you're saying, but is really thinking about. I use the term capacity planning, but it's very similar to what you just said. Kind of what can each individual produce at their optimal productivity. Now, in reality, there's no way to know for sure. Every individual is different and brings unique skills and knowledge, right? But certainly, as you gain experience growing a sales organization, you can develop some assumptions around productivity based on what you've seen from all the people you have on your team or who you have worked with in the past. And oftentimes you can start to develop some more planning around that based on what you have seen others do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I just think there's a way to measure that with more precision. I'll leave it to the software guys to figure out how to do that.
Yes.
Well, because I think it's really critical. I mean, I think you can't really plan capacity if you don't really know what people's productive capacity is. And it's not 100% a quota. Mm-hmm. They produce X number of dollars of revenue per hour.
Yeah.
Theoretically, right? And what is that number? And so, you could have two reps that both close $1 million deal, but one does it with the investment of 10 hours of sales time and the other takes 30.
Well, and that can be a very important indicator of their productivity. Sometimes if it's just one deal, there's a little bit of luck that comes into play with it too. So you look for the patterns, you look at the bigger picture of it. I was reading something else recently that was making a good argument about measuring sales productivity on what they do with the leads they're given to them. So it's not how much they're closing, but what the results are they get out. If one person gets 20 leads, another gets 100, well, is the person with 100 getting 5 times more results than the person with 20? That's another interesting way to look at it. As you know, it's also challenging because not all leads are created equal as well. But there's lots of different ways you could slice it and look at it.
All right, so sort of last question or last couple questions. You had recently written an article about sales and marketing alignment. You had gone to a conference Jeff Davis put on. Yeah. And you had a couple interesting points in the article. And one is that in the first part, he said if a company is going to improve its alignment, that the CEO really has to be the one that drives that. And you talk about making the business case for alignment. So I've just found that interesting. What is the business case for alignment?
Well, that's a great question. And by the way, Jeff's done 2 of his sales and marketing alignment summits, great events. And this most recent one in June, I believe, yes, that was a main topic, making that business case. Well, the business case ultimately is what more can you get as an organization? How can you grow more successfully, achieve better sales through having better alignment between marketing and sales? That argument will resonate with some CEOs, not with others. I mean, they say the challenges with alignment do start at the top in some ways. Because
absolutely.
The type of culture that the CEO has defined for the business or as we all know, I mean, the culture is set by the CEO, whether they intentionally define it or it just happens around them. Either way, they're shaping it intentionally or accidentally. But that argument around alignment it'll resonate with some of them. It won't with others. But I think it's a battle worth fighting. And certainly, you look at the type of response that Jeff has gotten to his events or others that talk about alignment, even just with the limited writing and speaking I've done about it. Like, there's huge interest, particularly in the younger generation of sales and marketing professionals. There's less patience for the traditional gulf or gap between marketing and sales, and more of a desire to seek better alignment. And I think as that continues to trickle through the business culture, we'll see more of a focus on it. But ultimately, it's going to a CEO and talking about what more can we achieve, not just in soft terms, but ideally, if you can make some projections from a revenue standpoint, that's a good way to catch the attention of many CEOs as well.
Yeah, well, my second thought on reading that was, sort of interesting that you have to go to a CEO. The CEO wouldn't have recognized that the issue exists already, right? That somehow this required a business case presentation, which speaks to the culture issue, as you described.
There's different types of CEOs too, right? I mean, there's finance-focused CEOs, there's sales-focused CEOs, there's many product-focused CEOs. It depends what stage of company you're talking about as well. But if they're not coming from that sales and marketing background, then oftentimes they do need help getting better educated on it. Yeah,
I thought it was funny. I one of the sort of promises of account-based marketing, quote unquote, account-based marketing, account-based everything, if you will, is that it, for account-based strategies, it really forces sales marketing alignment. And I saw an article today or yesterday, I can't remember what it was, or someone saying account-based sales and account-based marketing have to work together. It's like, oh my God, the new thing that was supposed to be the cure for the lack of alignment, now we're talking about they have to align.
Yes.
And I thought, well, okay, more things change, more things stay the same, right?
Yes.
So, all right. Well, Matt, it's been great having you on the show. Tell people they can find out more about FunnelWise and connect with you.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. It's been a real pleasure to be here with you today. I appreciate the opportunity to appear. And you can learn more about FunnelWise on our website at funnelwise.com. There's also a copy of my book on there. We'd love to have you download a copy. If you'd like to connect with me individually, would love to hear from you. You can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn. Or if you prefer to avoid having to spell my last name, I'm even easier to find on Twitter, just FunnelWise Matt.
FunnelWise Matt, okay. And your last name, not hard, Ostanik.
You got it. That was perfect.
Yeah, well, I'm reading it, so I'm good at that. All right, so Matt, thanks again for joining us. Friends, thank you for spending this time with us today. Make sure you come back, join us for next episode of Accelerate. So thanks again for joining us. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.